Welcome to Autism ADHD TV. It is the place to be for parents and professionals. I'm your host, Holly Blanc Moses, the mom psychologist who gets it. We dive into all kinds of important information like behavior, social skills, and learning. All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to part 2. Audrey Tancini, the teacher who gets it, is going to walk us through behavior in the classroom, home and school, and how all of that coordinates and comes together. But first, I'm going to introduce her. Audrey is a teacher with 15 years of experience working in both public and private schools. She has an undergraduate degree in elementary education. She is a national board certified teacher and holds a master's in special education. She specializes in working with students with disabilities and currently teaches small groups of students reading and written language. Welcome back, Audrey.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
So glad that you're here. So make sure, like I said before, go back and listen to part 1. It was so amazing. We talked about relationship building and mistakes and perfectionism and looking at behavior through a trauma lens, all the things that you need to know that are just foundational. So definitely go back and listen to part 1 before you listen to today's episode, part 2. Okay, Audrey, you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's talk behavior.
Okay.
Avoidance, challenging behavior. This is what we hear. These are the phone calls, when the parent sees the school calling. This is what we're talking about, right? Like the anxiety the parent is experiencing. Oh no, like what happened? And, the child really struggling, the teacher struggling, and it's hard stuff. So I think it's important that we just chat about it.
Yeah. So like we talked about last time, like relationships are the biggest piece there, and figuring the kid out, how they communicate, what they're trying to tell you. And I think one of the big things that I wanted to make sure we covered, just thinking about what's happening immediately before, or it could even be like at home before, but what's happening before you see the behavior. So was it, there's a lot of things to think about. Are they hungry? Are they sleepy? Did they have a terrible recess? Did they have too much fun at recess? Right? Sometimes it's the transition back into the room that can cause a big problem. Are they being bullied? There's just so much to think about, but oftentimes that can be the secret into figuring out where it's coming from. And it could also be a word you're using. Like, we're going to start our tests now, right? Maybe the test just triggers them and sets them off. So if you can figure that part out, sometimes you can help extinct the behavior. But also, what doesn't get thought about that often is sometimes the consequence. Often that can be like, just seem like, oh, your consequence is, you're going to go to timeout or you're going to sit out. But the consequence can be something you're not aware of. Like, I'll tell you a story. One time when I had a kid, he was getting in trouble. This is before this was like my first or second year of teaching. The principal would often come and get it. When he was having trouble, he would flip chairs, turn desks over. So the principal would come and get him. And I found out that she would take him to his office and he would help like fold and stuff envelopes. Sometimes he would get to walk around the school with her and do classroom check-ins and run the errands around the building. So that's a really fun consequence. Like, you're getting sent to the principal.
Love that consequence.
So he was getting in trouble. He was flipping desks because he knew, oh, I'll get to go to the principal if I do this. I get out of class, plus I can go like help stuff envelopes. That sounds great, right? So you also have to think about like what's happening next. And I don't mean to like say that principals are going to hate me for telling that story, but you just never know how the child is interpreting that, right? So the principal probably had the conversation with him and was giving him a break from returning to class, but he saw it as an incentive, not a consequence.
I like that example. When I was, this is probably 20 years ago now. It was one of my first school consultations that I got called in for. And I went to observe this child, kind of a similar situation where they were thinking that they were putting a consequence in place or a punishment in place so he would stop throwing chairs, jumping off the desk, screaming. And what I had observed when I came, because we have to go in, not have any assumptions, because if we do, we're probably going to get it wrong. So I went in, watched carefully and silently as he became very, very upset right before PE. And what ended up happening was a combination of things. I was able to see that he was struggling with the environment. The gymnasium was incredibly difficult to be in. He was noise sensitive. There was a lot of chaos. It was a bit unstructured, where all those things were tough. And there was a new assistant teacher.
Got it.
Who was so lovely. And she knew the books that he liked. And so she would sit with him and kind of pet his head to calm him down. And she was really just trying to help.
Yeah.
Just like the principal. And I think that's where it gets kind of confusing and why we need to step back. So every time we go into a situation where we're looking at something challenging, or, if a child is avoiding work, avoiding any kind of situation, there's always a reason. And it's usually what's not obvious. Like you said, digging and digging and digging. So if PE was something that he wanted to do, a physical exercise was good for him, maybe it was in a different location, or maybe the whole class went outside instead, or they had it more structured, or maybe there was a way to include the group in a preferred activity that he'd like to do that would be good for their physical health. And also the teacher could provide that extra support or attention from her during other times that could be more helpful outside the time of the challenging behavior. So, again, just looking at that in different ways, because timeout traditionally is called timeout from reinforcement. It's supposed to be a punisher, but if it's used in a way that's not helpful, it actually makes it worse.
Right.
So we always have to look at all of the pieces. And I love that you brought up hunger and sleep. We know that kids that are differently wired, kids with ADHD, kids with autism, they have trouble sleeping so much more than other kids. I mean, it is hard, and parents know this better than anything else. Sometimes it's hard for them to get to sleep. Sometimes it's hard for them to stay asleep. Maybe when they're sleeping, their quality of sleep isn't great. It is hard when you're feeling not right in your body and have to pay attention and have to be told all these directions and do this and go there. And it can be overwhelming. What makes it so much more difficult is, how do you communicate that to your teacher? It may not come across that way. It may come across where I've got my head down.
Right. And you think they're being lazy, but actually they're like very tired and hungry. They don't often know that they're tired and hungry.
Well, there's probably a lot of feelings there all together. And again, figuring out how to communicate that. And I think we have to remember that communication is something we look at when we're doing an autism evaluation. So we can't expect someone who is not built to communicate in the way maybe we expect to communicate in the way that we expect, right? Like, that's kind of silly when you think about it. So there's so many lovely things that we can do to help support that communication. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it could be things like pain, experiencing GI discomfort, which is also incredibly common, unfortunately, for this population. And when you're experiencing pain, and then you're tired, and then you're uncomfortable, and I mean, how hard is it going to be to do work, especially if you're giving some challenging work?
Right. Then that's when you see the shutdown.
It can be really hard.
It makes sense. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things that I try to do is like affirm the behavior, or not the behavior, but like the feeling. Like, say, you must be feeling really tired today, or you had a hard time at recess. Tell me about what happened. If you can pick up like a little nugget of what you think might be wrong or causing the behavior, if you can just like say something that affirms like it's okay that you're feeling this way. And sometimes you can get information out of them. Sometimes you need a little system, like a post-it note system or something, where like yellow means like they need a minute. Sometimes they could put like a red post-it, a green, it doesn't have to be certain colors, like red, yellow, green, could be a blue one, but it could just be something that they put out to just tell you like, I'm not in a good mood right now, not feeling well, like give me a minute, so that you don't jump in on them and say, lift your head up, sit up, you need to start reading, we're working on class. Like if they need a moment, sometimes you just need to give them that moment.
Exactly. And it's hard to do, especially when you're feeling in the moment. I would imagine as a teacher that, when your head's down, it seems that you're not learning, you're not attending. And also it may even feel a little disrespectful.
Yeah.
When a child's head is down. And it could be, again, for so many different reasons. There was a high school student who had their head down, and it was because they felt anxious. They felt that somebody was looking at them. They didn't want anyone looking at them. So they put their head down. And of course that was helpful in that moment because nobody was looking. They couldn't see that anyone was looking up, but everybody was. Yeah. Because the teacher was saying, put your head up,
calling them out.
Put your head up. And again, the teacher was just trying to do the best they could, at the moment for what they knew at that time, because the person, wasn't in a space to communicate what they needed and what their anxiety was about. And then they ended up, being physically escorted out of the class in front of everyone, which obviously everyone was looking. And it's all, again, complicated and it's hard. Yeah. And, we want to make sure that we recognize that teachers are in a classroom with so many kids. They have tons of information to get through. They have, some children have 504s, some have IEPs. Some probably may need some additional support, but they don't have that in place. And again, I wish every teacher had 2 assistants in their, at least in their classes, right? That way they can get some help. Right. And the classrooms to be smaller. I think we all wish that. They're paid to be higher, which totally deserve that too, right? My goodness. So I love that you brought that up. And you also brought up bullying, which I think is a great point because kids are sly. Mm-hmm. My child had told me that another student had called him I don't even want to say the R word in class. And he was so upset. He had a meltdown. And of course, it looked like it came out of nowhere. Right. Because this other kid whispered it to him. And so, initially he got in trouble for having this meltdown in class, but how is he supposed to feel, when somebody calls him that? I mean, it was horrible. Right. And so, the teachers were great. We figured it out all together and worked it out. But, if we weren't able to figure it out, it would have looked like he was just being disruptive. Right. And then it can go down the wrong path, right? Because you're not working towards the correct solution. You invented a problem, really. Invented a problem. That's exactly right. Exactly right. And so, he didn't feel safe at that time. And if someone doesn't feel safe, how, again, how will we expect them to react? Yeah. So, when we're talking about the behaviors, and it was interesting, you were talking about the things that can happen prior. And sometimes, like you said, it can be days in advance that something happened that was bothering that child. And, or it could be that morning, it could be the night before they didn't sleep well. It could be, something happening within their family that they're concerned about, but they're not communicating it. It could be that this is a type of activity at school, say math or whatever subject you want to say, that child has a history with. And that sort of loops back into that trauma lens we talked about yesterday.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. So it loops back into, okay, now I don't want to do this. So you're going to get an avoidance behavior or whatever you make it out of it. But one thing that I do to try to quell the bullying or the lack of communication is I use books. So I've tried to find like as many books as I can with neurodiverse characters. So it goes in the same lens of like culturally responsive teaching that we should all be really focused on, of like kids seeing themselves in a book. So you want to make sure like gender is matched, race is matched, but in the same vein, you want to make sure neurodiversity is matched. So all your books can't be about perfect, normal kids. Like the kids aren't going to identify with that, but they identify with books about, there's one book called Out of My Mind. I don't know if you've read that, but it's about a girl who can't speak, but she's actually like the smartest student in her class. And the book is told through her perspective. So you hear her talking and she knows everything, but she just can't get the information out.
Oh, that would be so hard. And I like that you do that, because the children that I work with, they often say they feel alone, and that must be a really tough feeling. And it's important and that peers are educated. And that's what we hear often too, Audrey, is that, okay, here's this child and we're supposed to make them be like everyone else. And that is not at all the way to go. Okay, that's not going to work. That's silly. That's saying this person is wrong or broken, not true.
Exactly.
So what we need to do then is change the environment, educate those peers.
Exactly.
And this is actually a book. Let's see. Oh my goodness. Did you just hear my mess?
Yeah. I was like, I thought someone fell over.
It did fall over. That's exactly what you heard. Those watching on YouTube just saw like this. Yeah. Anyway, so I think this is a really cool book. We Move Together, and how people.
I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's a great picture book, and about how, supporting different communities and the way people move with their bodies and in their environments, that we can all move together. It doesn't have to be this one way.
Nice. I gotta check that out.
Yeah, everybody moves in a different way.
That's cool.
And that is really cool. So I think as much as we can educate as young as we can educate, the better.
Because that's where the book is great, right? Because it's going to educate the kids who, like, let's say the bullying kids can see the character that's being bullied in the book. And then the children in the class that feel different or feel weird can identify. And you can use it as talking points with your kids. So you're not talking about them, but you're talking about the book characters. And then I bring it back all the time. I'm like, okay, is that what Serafina would do in this situation? How do you think she would feel? And if you can use a book character in the conversation, sometimes you can get more out of the kids because they feel like they're talking about that character and not themselves, but they're telling you really about themselves,
And if at some point, which I've seen some kids do, want to educate others when they're ready about themselves. Yes. And I love that it's not just, again, on that child's responsibility to educate all their peers. I mean, it really is our responsibility as adults to lead that. And if they feel comfortable to share, that's up to them, for sure, because they're going to be the best person to teach people about themselves, right? They know themselves better than anybody. So I think that's always so very cool. And then, we talked a little bit about the giving of information, following directions. When we think about processing speed and we think about words versus written instructions, we really need to think about the way kids learn and process if we're going to be teaching them.
Yes. So you know what I do that I don't know why I haven't always done this, but I think it's just the nature of the report. You get like a neuropsych eval of a student when they join your group or they're in your class, and you look at it, and you accidentally will look at it from a lens of like, okay, where are they weak? Like, what do we need to improve? But you should really flip it and look at the neuropsych for the strengths, right? So if reading comprehension is very low, or maybe their listening comprehension score was super high, so then you need to use all the high scores in order to, build that child's plan. So like you said, should they have to write their spelling words out? Maybe they could spell them orally and get them correct, and you'll see a huge improvement. Like maybe they can do that. And it's just the transfer from head to hand to paper is where things get lost, but they do know how to spell, right? Or maybe they do really well at listening comprehension. So you need to tell them the instructions and they repeat them back to you instead of reading them.
I love that. And that can make all the difference. And and I've told this story before, because I think it's so important. My youngest son, who his processing speed is quite different than average, and he needs something different. So when it comes to spelling, he was failing. I mean, over and over again. And I would hear these things. I'm so bad at spelling. I'm terrible at it. I hate it. There's another spelling test today. Didn't even want to go over doing fun activities, ways of learning that, he would typically like. And he was just feeling really bad about himself. And so I asked the teacher, can you please go ahead and test him orally?
Oh.
And they were not open, because here are some compromises, right? Sometimes that come up between parents and teachers. And they were like, well, we don't really have time. And I said, okay, let's just then do a trial of testing him orally on the words he did not get correct written, right? Because he also had fine motor difficulties, handwriting problem. I mean, it was hard to read.
Got it.
So also, and I said, is there any questionable writing? Then, going ahead and testing him orally on those as well. And so he went from failing to A's and B's.
Yes.
And
that's awesome.
What if we never did that? He would have hated spelling for the rest of his life and just thought he was just really bad at it. But really, it was the presentation of the information and requesting the information to show how much he did know.
Right. See, the same thing goes like for reading books. The auditory book, you have to just like normalize that listening to an auditory book is reading, because the kids will say, well, I'm not actually reading, I'm listening, which is not really true. You are listening and you're comprehending, and that's what reading is. You're comprehending the text and you can have a conversation with me about it. We can work on the mechanics every day in class and get you better at physical reading, but true reading is comprehending. Right.
So I like that. Yeah.
It is all about comprehension. So if you want to listen to an auditory book and then you're at a higher level, that's actually going to be better in the long run for their writing skill, for their reading skill, when their mechanics catches up to where they want to listen to. And then they are learning that books are cool, right? Because they're not going to listen to a book that is low. They want to listen to like Harry Potter that they can't attack by themselves yet. So if you can get them listening to higher level books, then they realize like, oh, reading is kind of cool. These stories are neat. But some of them aren't able to access that because reading the physical is difficult for them.
I like that you said that too, because that's why the Autism ADHD podcast is a podcast, because we're listening. And I think that a lot of people do learn differently. That's why we have Autism ADHD TV on YouTube, so they can also watch this video if that works best for them as well. And I think if we think about ourselves as adults, some adults do prefer to read out of a physical book. Some like to read on a screen. Some people like to listen. I like to listen. That's how I learn. And, occasionally a book, but usually it's auditory for me. But for kids, we just expect them to learn this way. Like we just decided a long time ago, this is how you have to learn, kids. So
this is it.
This is just it. This is it. And it really doesn't have to be that way. So, that's definitely important to remember. So when we're talking about giving information in a way that works for them, like you were saying, sort of be a detective, figure out how they're learning. And, again, we chatted a little bit about this before, but if you give them a problem and they have a reaction to it, don't automatically go down that road of they're not trying, they don't care, they're giving me a hard time. And even if that's what automatically pops up for you, and if it is, that's okay, but that doesn't need to guide your action.
Yes.
It could be just a clue, a non-judgmental clue that something is not matching up in this moment. And, that communication part, what is it about this? It could be a combination of things. It could be the tired. It could be the hungry. It could be, I'll never get this right. I always fail.
Yes.
Or it could be, this is too easy. I'm sick of doing stuff I already know.
Right. Yes. So, there's always that. And like from a math lens too, I feel like I always talk about reading because I'm a reading teacher, but sometimes the math, it's like if they see that there's 20 problems to do on one page, that can be it. It's not that they can't do the problems. It's that they see all 20 and they're just, this is too much, right? I'm overwhelmed by the text on this page, or this, I can't solve all of these, right? If you just put one per page, you might see a totally different child. It's like you do have to just try small little things, but not jump to the conclusion like they're too lazy to do this.
Right. And I think that's so important. And you can get creative, like you were saying. I mean, just get one problem at a time, or just ask, like, how many problems do you want to do right now? And really giving them some choices in that.
Yes.
Because if it's not doable, nothing's getting done.
Right.
Right. I mean,
yeah,
it's just not. And that to me, and I think to you also, just not worth it. It's not worth upsetting a child because they aren't going to do something exactly how we ask. There's something wrong that we need to look at and fix. Something is not working for them.
Yeah.
And then, that's also an excellent way to teach self-advocacy. If we're saying, yes, I know it all comes together, right?
Yeah.
So lovely. We're so nerding out. Letting them, like, thank you for telling me that was too hard. I didn't know.
Yes.
Thank you for telling me that was boring and too easy. Let's see how we can make this better for you.
Right. Or thanks for telling me there's too many on this page. How about 2 per page? How does that look? And then if you let them design the worksheet or cut something that sometimes kids love, which it's whatever. If you just cut the problems out individually, I used to do this, and then I'll fold them all up, put them in a paper bag, and then they just reach in, grab a math problem, take it out, and do it. They will do all 20 because it's kind of fun to reach in the bag and pull one out.
That is fun.
It's not a worksheet, right? But it is a worksheet. It's just cut up into 20 pieces.
And if they don't do them all, you can figure out which ones were put back.
Yes.
And if the ones that were put back were difficult, you can see where you can start and build those skills. So there's so many great ways to look at making things doable. And doable is one of my favorite words, because if something's doable, then you can stretch from there. If something is seen as impossible, what are you going to do? You're not going to go anywhere. That child's upset, you're upset, and it's a big old mess, right? So when you're talking about consequences, it's a really interesting topic because it's hard to see what that's going to be like, because, at school, what does that mean? Are you taking something away? Is it a response cost situation? Are you losing your opportunity to participate in something? I know in our state of North Carolina, at least in public schools, you can't take away recess. And there's a very good reason why, because you shouldn't.
Yeah, you need it.
You should not take away recess ever. And I know that sometimes in private schools, they still do this. And I'm sorry, folks out there that think that's a good idea. We're going to have to agree to disagree on this one, because that is a horrible idea. In my opinion, they need to move desperately.
Just even fresh air, like get out of the situation,
especially with masks.
Just
they
go
need to
outside.
get
Yeah.
out there. They need to move. They need fresh air. They need the sun. They need the green space. We all know this is helpful. If they have activity, we also know that, when you have so much activity, physical activity, that you can actually perform academically longer.
Yes.
Plus the social opportunities. There are countless reasons why you don't ever take away recess. I don't know why I had to say it that way. It was kind of strange, but that's how it came out.
Say it louder. Yeah, you can't take away recess. Even though it feels like maybe a privilege, I guess, because it's like fun. It's not. It's a necessity. They have to do it. It's like sleeping. You need to go outside. You need to run around. Even I have some students that don't like to do anything at recess, but like they're getting just a chill moment to sit on the bench. It's fine. If that's their choice.
Too.
It's okay.
Because kids need to be alone if they need to. They're close to other kids in the classroom. There's a lot of kind of sensory stuff hitting them all over the place.
It's too much. Yeah.
Sometimes it's too much and they just need to be alone and sit there and regroup.
Exactly.
So again, you and I, same page, don't take away recess, period. Okay. So sometimes, they'll bridge a consequence with home. Right. Like this is going to be a call home or it's going to be detention or, after school suspension. I mean, there's lots of different states that call it different things.
All the things. Yeah.
All the things. But if we pack on heavy on that front end, then you would be amazed how much this does not need to happen, like these after consequences. And I'm not saying that people don't need correction and consequences. We all do. I need to be correct. I mean, everybody does, because we make mistakes. We need to learn. But learning doesn't always have to come from like a punishment.
Exactly.
Necessarily. There's a lot of times these kids already feel bad. I mean, why do we want to make them feel worse?
Exactly. Right? Yeah. If you do the front end work, you don't necessarily always need the punishment type consequence.
Right.
The negative consequence.
And it could be that, they need a break, but of course you have to be careful that we're not then, escaping something to be able to get that break. So we'll have to be mindful about that. Make sure they can get their breaks when they want them, not as a consequence. So we have to think about that. Also, again, that bullying part, sometimes kids want to get away from other kids. So they'll do things to help them feel safe. We've got to know about that part. But when we think about what we really want to happen, I think ultimately it's let's look at that goal. It's how do we calm our bodies? How do we communicate what we need? And really it's an opportunity for them to regroup, say, again, a fill-in sentence, which I'm a big fan of. I was upset because, and then have them fill it in either orally and of course, this is when they're calm, right?
Yes.
We don't want to add fuel to the fire there. Or that was too boring. Okay, thanks for telling me. Let's chat about how we can fix that or make that better for you, make that more comfortable for you.
Yeah.
So really, when I think about a consequence, I don't necessarily think this idea of punishing really gets us closer to that goal.
Yeah, it doesn't. Sometimes it can just create a larger wall because then they're like, oh, well, I'm going to get in trouble during fluency. She's going to punish me. I'm going to have to do it for homework. And it just creates kind of like a cycle that's not productive.
Absolutely.
It can be really unproductive.
It can be really unproductive. And like you said, it can cause other problems. I've seen the challenging behavior of lying come out of this specifically, where I just don't want to get in trouble. I just don't want to get in trouble. And so they're going to answer impulsively instead of, I did it. I'm sorry. Okay, that's cool. I appreciate you saying that you're sorry. So let's go ahead and see if we can have like a student meeting or whatever that needs to happen in order to help the situation.
Yeah.
Because again, kids make mistakes. So do adults, like you said beautifully in part one.
Yeah. You got to show them the mistakes.
You got to show them that we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
If you make a mistake, you're not a horrible person. It just means you're a person.
Yep. Especially when you're getting to know them. That's like what I was trying to say there. Like you tell them, I made the mistake of thinking that, you were okay with me telling you to do 20 problems for homework, but let's think about what you're comfortable with. And I think that's where it comes in, like talking to the parents often helps, and not using that as a punishment. Like saying, I'm going to call home because you did this bad thing. But like really one of the most transformational things that I've done with families that's helped me so much with teaching is just like constantly sending quick one-off, like, guess what happened? Like, Brad decided to read out loud in class today. It was awesome. It takes 20 seconds to send that email, but not only communicating when it's bad. Because if the kid knows that you and mom are like kind of on friendly terms, or you, mom and dad chat, like you just see a different side of them.
Right. And I think that's such a good point is, when there is good communication between teachers and parents, I mean, that is definitely a game changer for the child, for sure. And because parents, they're really worried. I mean, I wear the parenting hat, of my kids, and it stresses me out, what's happening at school and making sure they're okay. And, all of those things. I am that parent that when the school is on the phone, it pops up their phone number. I'm like, what's going on? But, they're the teachers that have been instrumental in our children's growth are the ones that cared about them, that I know cared about them, didn't think they were a bother, didn't think they were bad, thought they were struggling, and wanted to support them in a way that worked for them. And that it changes everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
When you can, like, I used to be kind of afraid of parents when I was younger.
I understand.
When I first started, I was like so intimidated, like I have to talk to their parents, because I felt like I needed to like fix the kid, or like I needed the kid to do so many great things, or I wasn't being a good enough teacher, and I had all sorts of anxiety about it. But I started realizing like parents are just very much vulnerable, very scared people that are like, you're my child's teacher. What are you going to do to help them? I want you to help them. Yes. And then when I realized that, I'm like, okay, so how are we going to help them together? Here's what I notice about him. Is this what you notice? Have you seen anything like this happen before? What have you done? Here's what I'm going to try. I think this might work, right? And not being like, I have all the answers. This is what's going to work. But just being like very open and like this back and forth kind of collaboration. It works well. And COVID is really, it was one of the positives, because you were like in their house every day. I feel like I got a little bit closer to the parents because they were right there. But it's just a little, it doesn't take that as much work as it sounds like, just having that kind of collaborative conversation rather than I can fix your child or I can't fix your child.
Yes, I love that. We are here to support and care and figure out their learning style and what works best for them. And, when a parent and a teacher are on the same page, it is just a wonderful thing. And I think the student really feels that.
They can tell.
They can tell.
Yeah.
They can tell, definitely. When you mentioned communication, we had talked quite a bit, sometimes like figuring out how to communicate. And I know the teacher's busy and I'm busy. So figuring out, maybe it's a quick weekly email, just like a catch up and almost an outline. And sometimes I'll do that. I'll be like, top 3 strengths that you noticed this week, and top 3 that you noticed. And it's like, bam, 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 and then we can kind of check in. So I always think some kind of planning for communication is a good thing.
That's a good idea.
That everybody can work for their schedules. So that's always fantastic too. But thank you so much, Audrey, for coming on and talking with me again. I really appreciate it. You were so much fun.
Oh, thanks. I had fun.
We are very much on the same page. So I hope that you can come back and talk to us again sometime.
Great. I'd be happy about that.
Okay. Thanks so much. And
Thanks.
We'll see you later.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to click that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like this episode, please share it with someone. It may just be what they need to watch today. If you're a parent, I'd love if you came on over and joined our Facebook group, Autism ADHD Group for Parents. If you're a therapist or educator, come on over to our group, Autism ADHD Group for Therapists and Educators. You're going to find those links right down there in the notes. Thanks so much, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.
All content provided is protected under applicable copyright, patent, trademark, and other proprietary rights. All content is provided for informational and educational purposes only. No content is intended to be a substitute for professional medical or psychological diagnosis, advice, or treatment. Information provided does not create an agreement for service between Holly Blanc Moses Crossvine Clinical Group, the interviewee, Holly Blanc Moses LLC, and the recipient. Consult your physician regarding the applicability of any opinions or recommendations with respect to your symptoms or medical condition or the symptoms or medical condition of your family member. Children or adults who show signs of dangerous behavior toward themselves and or others should be placed immediately under the care of a qualified professional.